So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Today we were talking about beyond keywords, how auto-classification transforms enterprise search and also enables trusted AI. If you are new here, my name is Jen Nelson. I am with Valora Technologies. Joining me is Sandy, who is our co-founder and CEO at Valora. So welcome this afternoon. We are kind of halfway mark for our webinar series this year. This is not an updated slide. We have many more webinars coming. We have one per month until the end of the year, but this will be updated by next time that we have this webinar. But if you've missed any of the ones that we've done so far throughout the year, I would encourage you to go to our website and go into our resources, and all of our webinars are recorded and the slides are available to you as well. So if you've missed anything and you'd like to see, then I encourage you to go back. A little bit about Valora, if you are new here. We offer an auto-classification platform for information governance and lifecycle management across the enterprise. So it leverages auto-classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate the identification and the classification, and then ultimately the defensible disposition of enterprise content regardless of where it lives. And it's usually used by IG teams, records teams, legal compliance teams to help better govern their data, and brings not only all multiple repositories, but also multiple information governance use cases under one umbrella through a single pane of glass. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about you. We always ask you when you register kind of where you're coming from, what your challenges are, and kind of who you represent. And lots of course, as we see, lots of RIM folks on the call, so welcome. And interesting today, when I usually ask this question for webinars, it's usually very weighted in one area or the other. And it was very interesting to see that the most challenges across the board for attendees today is very even across the board. So you're in the right spot. We've got lots to talk about today, and we're excited to get into it. A little bit of housekeeping about kind of what we're doing here today. So in the chat, either in the chat or the Q&A, please feel free to enter your questions as we go, and we'll do our best to answer them, bring them up and answer them as we go. If not, we'll have some towards the end. But Sandy and I, if you haven't attended a webinar with Sandy and I, we are very kind of back and forth and have no problem interrupting each other. So please feel free to ask your questions as we go. As I mentioned, with the resources page in our webinar, there will be a recording of this and the slides sent out to everybody after the fact. So you can expect that in your inbox probably tomorrow morning. And feedback. We would really appreciate your feedback on either format or content or timing. If you have any comments, we would love to hear them, and you can respond to the email we send you tomorrow to let us know that as well. So our agenda. We've got an hour, so let's get into it. We are talking about, again, how auto-classification can help transform enterprise search. And it's really something that's coming up a lot. I mean, it's always kind of been around us, but a lot lately, about how organizations are facing kind of the same challenges. Doesn't matter how big they are, doesn't matter what industry there are. It's really how to find that right information when you need it and when it kind of matters the most. And all of the technologies that we've kind of used to date have promised that, enterprise search and, connected everything, and, you can find it everywhere. But most organizations are still very challenged with how do I find my stuff? So today we're going to explore kind of why that happens, and why the missing piece is not often better search technology, but is really better understanding of the information underlying it, the information itself. So we're going to help kind of shed some light on how auto-classification can help transform enterprise search by adding that kind of business context to everything. And what I hope to do also with our agenda today is get into a bit of a mini demo as well, to take you into Black Cat, which is Valora's platform, and have a little peek about how auto-classifying information can lead to very easy, accessible enterprise search. So this is a great slide, and Sandy put this together. I thought it was great because it really talks about the evolution of search. And, 20 years ago? No, 30 years ago, in 1996, that can't be right, in 1996, really evolved from like I can't find the document to 20 years ago. I've got way too many results when I'm trying to find something to 10 years ago. I have to search all of these systems to try to find what I'm looking for. And now with the advent of AI, AI found the wrong stuff, but is very confident about what it's finding and summarizing. And then search into the future. Can I trust these results? And this is very similar to what we're seeing in the feedback we're hearing with certainly with the advent of AI and kind of throwing AI engines onto information and data is that trusted, and can you trust that source? So search has come a long way at the enterprise scale, but we still do have a long way to go. So why is this such a problem? Our enterprise search is a context problem. Search technology is literally everywhere. Everything that we are using has a search capability, whether it's M365, SharePoint, Google Workspace. But users that we're talking to are consistently telling us the same thing. Like, I know it exists somewhere, but I can't find it. And so the problem usually isn't that the search is broken. The problem is that the search can only work with the information and the context that's available to it. So when that information in all of these systems across the enterprise lacks that structure or lacks the governance or that, most importantly, the consistent classification, even the most sophisticated search engines will struggle to deliver that content that you're looking for. And if you just think like how often, even in the last even for me, I'm guilty, in the last month, like, have you ever spent more than 15 minutes trying to find something where you're like, I know it exists somewhere, I just can't find it. And this is really why one of the reasons that keyword search falls short, excuse me, because it relies so heavily on keywords. It's looking for, keywords or exact words or phrases, file names, document contents. Sometimes we're looking for, a metadata that we've asked, reliable human beings to add to business content. But business questions are rarely keyword questions. So nobody wakes up and says, I need a document containing these exact words. Not usually, anyways. Instead, they're asking questions like, so which documents here contain someone's personal information, or which records are subject to retention requirements, or what contracts here are active, which policies here are current versus outdated. These are questions about meaning and context, not really about keywords. And so the challenge is that the keyword search doesn't really understand those kinds of distinctions and understand those types or the context of those questions.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, because
of course, yeah.
This comes up in a lot of discussions with either potential clients or actual clients who are working already with auto classification. And we have been trained by the systems to speak in keywords. That's not the normal way that we would function. You don't walk into the kitchen and go, peanut butter, jelly. Like you're like, I'm hungry. I want something to eat. Mom, what's for dinner or whatever. That's the sort of normal way that we function, but the systems historically couldn't really handle that kind of inquiry. We'll get into AI in a moment, but historically they haven't. So we learned to speak keywords as this kind of shorthand to try and query these systems. And the problem with that is that there are so many other data facets available to us now, but we don't naturally think of them. It's very different to say, like, give me everything related to this employee's termination, and all I type in is Jen Nelson employee termination. I could pull up an email discussing whether or not we should terminate her. That's completely different than, no, I'm after the records related to her termination. And what we're dancing all around here is document type, right? Where is the letter where she is terminated? Where is the system of record that indicates that she was informed on this day, terminated on this day, and therefore, the disposition is this many days later? That is a complicated sort of search to try and construct in keywords, even though all those other data facets are generally available, like the date of termination, whether it's a record or not, the type of document in question. That is, well, I'm giving away the punchline in case you couldn't guess, but that is where auto classification really changes the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And barring Sandy stealing our thunder here toward
I do that.
so so it's that fact now that search now is a risk management issue because we've got those growing pressures from privacy regulations and public records requests if you're in that sphere, and litigation, certainly breaches and cybersecurity incidents, and compliance obligations with the regulatory investigations. And when a DSAR arrives, organizations must find personal information quickly, and if a breach occurs, we got to identify what was exposed, and what is that risk. And when a litigation arises, we need to locate the relevant information and records to really demonstrate a defensible process that we have. And the question is really no longer, can we search? The question is, can we trust what our search results are telling us? And that leads to really one of the most common questions that we hear today. Can't AI just find what I'm looking for? Because everyone's asking that. And it is a fair question, right? Because AI can summarize documents for us. It can answer questions. It can search across repositories. It can even generate reports and recommendations and analyze information. And so many companies are assuming that AI will eliminate the need for classification and governance because we'll just get the AI to do it. But what we're actually seeing is the opposite. AI is making information quality and governance now more important than ever. And to understand why that is, then we kind of look at the challenge that AI shares with traditional search, because now AI has the same problem that traditional search has had. And AI is extremely powerful. We're not saying it's not, but it's reading information is not the same thing as understanding the context and the organizational context around that information. So, considering, is what it's reading the current version? Is it taking the right final version? Is the document or the policy that it's reading, is that the right one? Is the information that it's pulling in sensitive when we've, declared to our clients that no client data will be used for AI purposes? Or is the content outdated? Is it, it's reading policies from 97 and 98 where it's giving the same weight to the policies created this year? So it's not really understanding which information should carry more weight and which should be ignored altogether. And this is really one of the biggest risks that AI brings to enterprise AI and enterprise search. And this slide kind of illustrates.
Before you get into this, one of the things that I get asked all the time that I think will be very helpful here is, what is the difference between search and retrieval? People tend to use those interchangeably, but academically, they're actually different. Search is the act of looking for something, and retrieval is actually finding it. And I'll use another parental example. It's when you tell your child, go get whatever, go get your shoes, and they go, well, I looked for them and I can't find them. That's search, but they're still barefoot and you need to go. Right? Retrieval is actually when the mother says, here they are in the refrigerator, because of course that's where your shoes are, right? That's the difference between search and retrieval. And too much of our effort has historically, and even still, is spent on the act of searching instead of targeting the retrieval. What is the objective? What am I after? Now, what's the most efficacious way to arrive at that answer? That is the science of retrieval. And it's why you hear retrieval coming up more and more, particularly in academic settings, but you'll also hear it in the AI universe. So back to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally. And this slide, or this kind of information flow, kind of illustrates what most organizations are dealing with today. Because inside that enterprise content is obviously where all our data lives. But we've got, again, current policies, old policies, outdated information, old stuff, sensitive stuff that, is sitting in there in HR and otherwise. Now, imagine connecting that AI engine directly to that environment, and AI can access all of it. So it's not whether AI can find the information. Well, of course it can, because it's there. But the challenge is whether AI knows which information it should trust. And one of the biggest misconceptions about enterprise AI is that AI somehow will fix that information quality problem, where in reality, AI often amplifies them. And most organizations are focusing on that purple box, the AI box. But the real challenge is everything above it. Because if obsolete content exists, AI is going to use it. And if the duplicative content exists, it's going to use it. And if there's conflicting versions, it may struggle to know or determine which one is the best one, which one is the authoritative one to use. So AI isn't really the problem. The quality and the governance of the information feeding AI is the problem. And this is why information governance.
Just to pick up on that,
course.
It's a problem that gets compounded. So take something like versions. Let's say you're a typical organization and every contract has 14 versions. At least that seems to be the case with our contracts with clients. So let's say there's on average 14 versions. So that means there's 13 out-of-date versions for every one sort of master copy, the final copy that's actually signed. So what you have is a 13-to-1 kind of noise to signal ratio there. AI really kind of struggles with understanding which is the most valuable one. So it has 13 kind of false positives against one true positive. So it is going to be kind of biased or misinformed 13 times out of 14. Y'all can do that math and see just how much of an impact having old, obsolete, duplicative, wrong data, just how badly that skews the AI results, even though the truth is embedded in the population somewhere. It's almost like kind of population crowded out by the junk.
Yeah, absolutely. And AutoClassification can then act as that intelligence layer before it hits the AI. So it can tell the AI assistant, this is the right stuff, this is the wrong stuff, this is what should be used. And the result then is in trusted answers, because you know that it is feeding and learning off of the correct information. So by creating that kind of intelligence layer, what it's doing is to help tell us, this is the most recent version of this. This is the content you should ignore. This is the content that contains, sensitive client data. We don't use that. So by creating that metadata, both search engines and AI can use. Instead of treating every document equally, it prioritizes that content. And then it can be identified as, this is current, this is authoritative, this is relevant, use this, and dramatically improves the quality of those AI responses. So auto-classification is not in any way competing with AI, but it certainly helps AI learn from the right information. And all of these capabilities are really meant and designed to work together. Search answers the question, what contains these words, these keywords? Auto-classification answers, what is this information? What is it? And then AI answers, what does this information mean? And the most successful organizations we are seeing are using a combination of all of these three capabilities, because search is providing the access, classifications providing that additional context, and then AI is providing that insight and analysis and that the forward-looking questions. So all those three work together. Yeah.
This is especially valuable for all you organizations out there. Of course, nobody on this phone call, that you have stuff past retention, but for whatever reason, it is difficult to actually delete it out of your organization. This is where auto-classification can play an incredible role, because it will identify which data is past retention definitively. And even if you can't, pull the actual trigger, that can ultimately become a weighting signal. In other words, down weight the value of this data because it is past retention. I can't delete it. My organization won't let me, whatever. Maybe it's under legal hold if you're accurately retaining it. At least it's a signal that can be sent out to AI to downvote, if you will, this particular version of something or this instance of something.
Mhm. So just a quick note on, what even is auto classification. Automatically analyzing content and applying metadata based on that content and context. So it's doing a full analysis of every document to determine the rich metadata attributes of that document. It will provide recognition algorithms to determine the document type, which is extremely important to determining, what we should do with those kinds of things. And then the disposition algorithms to say, if it's this, do that. So if it is, if we're looking for stuff for Jen Nelson, her maybe an employment contract. So, what is this document? It's a Word doc. Yeah, that's the file extension, but the document is an employment contract. And then the disposition and the rules algorithms say, well, it should be stored in, the secure location in HR. The retention rules are 8 years after her termination, which that hasn't even happened yet. So always look for that date. And then it will actually do that for us. So auto classification in the true sense of it is kind of removing the human error element and automatically assigning these rules and the doc types to the documents. So what it's doing is automatically assigning, again, the record, everything to do with the records, categories, classes, retention, the sensitivity labeling, the privacy, whose information does this contain, and then, what is appropriate for use and what is not. And by doing this, really results in most of all the consistency of all that, because when you take that onus off your human team to say, you just tell me what it is, you classify it, you put all these important tags on it. We all know that is it's a big, heavy ask for your organization. So by removing that and auto classifying it, the key benefit there is consistency. It's also defensible because we can always see why it classified things a certain way, and then provides that additional business context to that as well. So what does that mean for enterprise search? It means that, without classification, when you're looking for something for keywords, it's going to give you all that kind of large, noisy, busy results. Whereas, auto classification can lend itself to find that relevant information with a smaller, smaller set. Becomes much more precise when you're looking for keywords with context. And then users can filter by business context, sensitivity, record type, department, shoe size, whatever you're looking for, whatever those metadata elements are, you can search by that. So it's going to bring back fewer false positives and kind of really, really tighten up the results that it's bringing back. The way most people are using enterprise search, or some of the big use cases anyways, that we're seeing consistently across the organizations that we're working with anyway. The first is DSAR in privacy requests. So it's a great example of go out and find something keywordish a little bit, but with context around it. So we know that personal information is literally living everywhere across our multiple repositories. So searching solely by keyword can miss important records or generate an overwhelming number of false positives. So if there's a request that I'm asking, Jen wants to know about all of the data that we have about her, but I'm an ex-employee. Every email I've written, every email I've sent, every calendar invite, everything all documents that I've written, all the custodian, I was custodian for a zillion things. If I'm looking just for my employment information, my name is over everything. So classifying that, who is Jen Nelson? What is the context here and what is her role? So classification will help identify that personal information, but then also kind of split it into, this is business things that Jen created, and then this is stuff about Jen and her, in this example, her employment here. In a case where there is a breach, the first question that leadership asks immediately is what information was exposed? And quite often it is a stretch for the organization to to know. When your content is classified already, it makes it very easy to say, this is exactly what was sitting here. Not even just exactly all of the content, but the kind of content, the sensitivity of that content. And it allows organizations, when you've got that instant, I know what was in here, it allows you to prioritize your response efforts. It allows you to very confidently understand what was in there and what was the risk. Usually that follow-on question is to why was all that stuff in there? So the challenge, the follow-on challenge there is, why did you still have that data? If it was personal data or client data and it was old, past client, obsolete client data, why do you still have that there? So quite often you'll see double damage of, not only was your stuff breached, but with the stuff you breach you shouldn't have had. So sometimes there's double damages or double duty fines, not only with the reputational damage, but increased liability, increased fines, because you shouldn't even have had it at all. So something to think about during the unfortunate incident of a breach response.
I'll pick up there. We put this why did you still have that data under breach response, because it's that double damages kind of problem, right? You've been breached. Now you have to indicate what was breached. And then you just invite the secondary question of, why did you still have that? Well, our organization's really bad at getting rid of things. Like, not a good look.
Not a good answer.
The problem is that every one of these gets exacerbated by that. And increasingly, the regulations, particularly around privacy, but not exclusively, are demanding that you not only defend the data that you have, but the processes that you use to determine either what you gathered in the first place, the basis for collection of that information, as well as what you retained over time. Did you match the policy that you said you would use that data for? Did you defensively delete it when you were supposed to, when it no longer had a useful life? All of these things are that secondary class of, are you behaving like a good data citizen? And that is incredibly tricky to establish and prove and defend if you don't even know what you have. How do you know you're doing a good job? You're probably not. And certainly it's going to be impossible to defend. So the more that we hear the question about why, the first question is always what is your data? The second question is always why. Why did you obtain it? Why do you still have it? Why is it stored in this secured location? Why do you have 18 copies? When you start to hear the why, that means there's going to be repercussions. And that if all of you are looking for kind of fuel for your fire to get budgets and approval and all of that, start listening for the why question, because that's the one that's going to come with fines, reputational damage, etc., litigation, all the ugly things.
Mm-hmm. And Sandy, why don't you take investigations and e-discovery as well?
Sure. So basically, and I have been kind of tooting this horn for a long time, which is, if you are properly managing your content, yes, with auto classification, meaning you know what you have and you know its life cycle, and therefore you're able to manage accordingly, then you should be reducing the vector that is available for breach, for litigation, for compliance, for every other kind of negative impact that is coming down the pike. So instead of the typical e-discovery approach, which is, well, let me look at the kitchen sink and I'll slowly work my way down. I'll do a first pass review, a second pass review, blah, 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 right? That is where all the expense is, just to get down to 0.01% of your data volume to go to court with, or to produce to the other side. If you can reduce the collection volume if you can reduce the data estate in the first place, then you can reduce the collection volume by having everything properly tagged before the litigation matter begins. Then you can start to pinpoint relevance, pinpoint privilege, and basically doing a first pass review by the fact that you've already had tagging done. So you've accelerated the review. What we didn't put there is, and severely impacted the cost of that. And then you've also improved your defensibility because you are following a repeatable process that presumably is documented by policy, as opposed to, well, that attorney thought it was privileged, Okay, that's good, but it's not as good if you need to defend your process over time across multiple matters. So ultimately, what the auto classification drives, in addition to cost savings and time savings and organization and control, is that you have also set up a reusable process with reusable metadata. If something was privileged because it was attorney-client communication, that's not going to change because it's a different matter. So you already will have that tag for the next matter that comes down the pipe. There's no reason to re-review that document for privilege. Maybe if it's one of the 8 that makes it to trial, sure. But as a first pass, kind of slice and dice, get it off the table, you're already there.
Awesome. So now what I think I'd like to do, we've got some time, so I think I'd like to bring you into a quick demo of Black Cat. And what we'll do is we will do a search, a DSAR search of a former employee. We're going to look and provide a breach report of a compromised area, and do an e-discovery search too. So bear with me while I hop into the demo. So this is what Black Cat looks like. For context, our platform is kind of 2 main technical components. The first is Powerhouse, and that is the auto classification engine that goes out and reads everything and classifies everything. The second part is Black Cat, and that's where humans can deal with and analyze and interact with and make decisions on volumes and massive volumes of content. So this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing Black Cat, and Black Cat is a very user-friendly interface. It's point and click drill down, but there's a lot of things. It's telling us a lot of things about the data, but there's a lot of things that we can still do with our data. So what we're seeing here, each chart that we see is a metadata field, and the contents of that, the volume of that, are the actual metadata fields. So let's look at, as an example, DSAR request. So Sally Smith is a former employee, and she has asked us to delete everything that you have on me. So if I did an enterprise search of Sally Smith, and I'm going to hit enter, a straight enterprise search, it's showing us everything that contains Sally Smith. So she was an employee, she's authored documents, she's in documents, she's on payroll documents, she's on the invite for the lunch schedule for the weekly Friday pizza lunches, she's everywhere. And that doesn't help us when we're trying to find that information about Sally Smith. So what we can do when everything is classified and auto-classified by employee name, dates, keywords, things like that, we can drill down and do searches not only into the content, but then also into all the different metadata values. So in this case, I'm going to search for employee name equals exactly Smith, Sally. And then I'm going to click OK. So now it's just bringing me back documents where the employee is tagged as Sally, not author, not custodian, not lunch date, employee documents. And this is looking at my first look. So these are looking at the charts. But if I click on list view, then I can have a view of the documents that now we are ready to review to be able to, can we share it or can we not share it with Sally Smith? So here we can see an injury report. We can see expense reports. And then here we're looking at a mockument. And this is a great example of how auto-classifying not only unstructured data, but structured data can help with the enterprise search of content regardless of where it lives. So in this case here, this mockument is just kind of like it sounds. It is a mock document. It has pulled Sally Smith's record from Workday. So Workday has, 100,000 different records and employees, and she's got different instances because she reported to different people on these dates and moved around. She worked here for 30 years. It's pulling Sally Smith from Workday so that we're not having to, go through Workday and find Sally Smith. We're not having to, if it was a hold, we don't have to hold Workday. We can just look at and pull these records about Sally Smith from those structured data systems. So this is a great example of how previously auto-classifying data can, this search result took me, okay, I was explaining a lot, but I mean, it took me under, under 5 minutes, actually probably under 5 seconds when you looked at it. And this now allows me to, of course, it would pull back more than 4 documents, but if you were going to produce these documents and give these documents to Sally to say, this is what we have on you before we delete it, I can show her that, I can show her the expense reports. I'm okay to share the first injury report. And now I'm okay to share this document. I'm not okay to share the 100,000, Workday database, but I am okay to share only the information that pertains to Sally Smith. So a very easy way to respond to a DSAR. And there's many ways that we can also collaborate with workflow. So I can send this to Sandy and Sandy can approve it for, release to Sally Smith or whatever that workflow is. We can work in Black Hat together collaboratively to do that and produce it. But that's for another day. Okay, let's look at a breach. Let's look at a breach because that's often, unfortunately, where some folks where we meet some folks is after a breach to say, how do we know what was in here? We would have had such a better time in our breach response and our breach response plans. So in an example of, we get an alert from IT that there has been a breach and they say, we know it was a Google Drive and we can see that they came into the marketing drive. And we'd be like, most times you'd be like, marketing, doesn't matter. But here we can very easily see what information was compromised and was anything of a personal nature. And we can do that by drilling down. So here in source, I can say, okay, the breach was in marketing. So now I can see that I'm down to 99 documents of my fake 232. So now I'm looking at only content for the marketing drive. And I want to know, was there any personal data here? Probably not. But then I can see, oh yeah, there was personal data here. So I'm going to click on that. And now it's going to tell me that there were 6 documents in the marketing drive that contained personal data. So I'm going to click on list view and I'm going to go see what those were. And I can see that there is a certificate. I can see it was somebody's Form 1040 that they accidentally saved to the marketing drive. I can see credit card account statements that somebody accidentally saved instead of saying to their OneDrive or to their My Documents. So this allows us to understand what was breached. We can respond to it. We can make decisions about the data, where we're going to have this data going forward. But if we had auto-classified before that, none of this even would have been here because we would have removed all the personal data from the marketing drive saying, why the heck is there personal data on the marketing drive? So by auto-classifying before any of these events take place, you are in a much better place to say, we are confident that there was no personal data on the marketing drive. Why? Because I can see what personal data, where it lives across the enterprise, and I can see that there's nothing of risk on these drives. And then vice versa, I can see that there is this risk and therefore can respond accordingly, knowing what information was breached. So that's a great example of a breach, the ability to quickly find and inform on what was compromised in a breach. Our third example, let's look at an e-discovery or an investigation for a litigation. If we were looking for, if there was a request, Aniela, we're going to pick on our Aniela. Everything, that Aniela wrote or corresponded with, we need to put on hold. So when I do a search for Aniela, I can kind of see her everywhere because she's an employee. Again, she's created documents. Her signature is all over everything. But when I look at list view, I can see, again, these are all my metadata fields and everything is corresponded here. I can see employee name. I can see that she's the custodian of everything, but I don't need that information. I don't need to know if she was the custodian of everything. I just need very specific things. So again, using an advanced search, I can come up here into advanced search and I say, who do I want to search? Okay, I want to search, definitely, okay, I want to search custodian. I want to search everything where Aniela is the custodian. I want to search dates because I don't need everything. I just need dates between 01/01 2012 and 01/01 26. And I don't want everything that Danielle is the custodian of between those dates, but I want to search anywhere where she's talking about the client. Is any of the words, what's a client that I have in this demo, Sandy?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I'm going to say the, because I can't remember what client's in there.
I don't know. We have a client with the in it.
I don't know.
Well, we'll find out, Jen.
We're going to find out. And then I want to search only the client pertaining to whatever. And then in the document itself, I want to search for the word complaint. And just for the purposes of this, I'm just going to remove this client name because I can't remember what client names I have in here. So I'm going to remove that search parameter. So now I'm looking for everything that Aniela was the custodian of, created between these dates, with the document text containing the word complaint. And let's send a little prayer to Jesus to see if anything's going to come back with this. And it does. Okay, great. I'm glad I left the client name out, but now it's showing us, instead of the 400 documents where Aniela was the custodian, rightfully so, now we're looking for created between these dates with the word complaint in it. So now I can look at a list view, and what it's showing me here, just for context, is a preview image of the document. It's showing me the text version of the document, and then it's showing me all of the metadata properties that have been assigned to this document as the auto-classification tool has gone through. So in the if I'm looking for specifically for the word complaint, I can type that down into here, and it's going to find where that instance of, this is a great use of keyword search.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's going to show us the instances that word exists in the document. So that's a great, I think it's a good example of, rather than sending your counsel everything that Aniela ever touched since the beginning of time, we're now sending everything between these dates with this subject, with this client, with these parameters around it. So that even just we saw in this demo, even though that document set, although they're tiny, albeit they're tiny, we went from 41 documents to 4 relevant documents that rather than paying somebody to go through and sort, we're telling them what is relevant.
And just to reiterate, Black Hat is looking across data sources. I so often hear, well, we put so-and-so's email box under hold, but that's only their email communications. What about everything else they authored or viewed or were aware of outside of email? Somehow, their OneDrive doesn't get put under legal hold or whatever, or it isn't considered relevant until somebody calls and complains. But if you're sort of taking a stricter interpretation of it's related to Aniela, it's related to this topic, it's in the date range, and it has nothing to do with her email, but it does fit the bill. So it's almost a way of kind of doing a much more intelligent culling and across the data estate, instead of just putting Aniela's entire 30-year email history under hold just because she's mentioned. So yes, I'm not going to, tell you all how to practice law. I am not an attorney. But I am a sort of practical user of technology to achieve the letter of the law.
Mhm. Yeah. So I hope that kind of gave a little bit of a sneak peek into Black Cat and what users can do with exorbitant amounts of information to be able to very accurately search for things that with precision that enterprise broad brush enterprise search cannot afford us. So I hope that showed you that. Uh, this is the model that we increasingly see organizations adopting. And all of these components work so well together. Search, finding the information, classification, adding the context, AI generating the insight into that. And together, these three really create those trusted answers. And it's that trusted answers and the right answers the first time is really what users are looking for. When we're looking for search and looking for certain things, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and
So,
I want to actually will you go back for a second?
of
Because
course, yeah.
when we started this conversation, we kind of showed how quickly within like 5-10 years we went from I can't find something to I'm completely overwhelmed with the responses to find things. That has never really left us. And then and that's sort of, kind of on this plane. Then you had AI coming in being like super confident, but the big question everybody has with AI, and rightly so, is did it get everything? Did it miss anything? Did it invent something? Those are trust questions, right? So you have overwhelming and trust. And where they meet in the middle is where, with auto classification, that helps kind of reduce and cull to the appropriate set in terms of the overwhelming volume, and adds things like lineage, authority, confidence, proof that adds the trust factor back into what the AI does. So I like how you frame this, Jen. AI auto classification really is the glue between these two models that are sort of smashing into each other willy-nilly. It does really provide a brilliant layer of structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So our key takeaways today, if you only take three things away from today's discussion, let it be that the first, that search without context just produces that noise and those overwhelming results that we often see. The second, that AI without the necessary business context introduces risk. Again, as Sandy said, is this right? Is it missing anything? Is it creating things that it thinks I want to see? And then the third is auto classification provides that context and the business context that improves, again, both search and the AI outcomes. And organizations that are investing in this information intelligence, we'll say, are building the foundation for more effective search and stronger compliance and better AI results. And more trustworthy AI. So the combination of these three really is, and we are seeing the organizations that have adopted that already are flying. So we'll leave you with that today. And, I will leave you with one final question for you. How confident are you that your AI tools are learning from the right information? And as you're having those discussions internally, and when it's top down AI, we're slow on AI, everyone else is adopting AI, we need AI. That's the real conversation where you can start is, you know, when we unleash that AI engine on our data, is it the right data? Is it the most appropriate data? Is it the authoritative data? And because your results for search, for governance, and for AI really begins with that, the structure and the governance and that enterprise data framework so that AI engines can learn from the right things.
Yeah, I'll
So we will,
piggyback on
of
that,
course,
Jen,
yeah.
which is it is a lot easier to get your data house in order and then unleash your AI than it is to do it
Mm,
the other way around. We have talked in this webinar series about unbaking the cake. If you put sour milk into your cake batter and then bake the cake, you cannot ever get that sour milk flavor out. You can't unbake that cake. And so in this metaphor, the bad data is the sour milk. If you go out, take the time, go to the store, get the fresh milk, use that in your cake batter, then your cake is going to be, I hope, delicious. If you don't, you're going to be stuck with that sour. The only way out of that is to literally start over and retrain from the ground up. If
Yeah.
you do it, if you get your data organized and kind of curated and cleaned up first, then you can bake a million cakes. Have at it.
How about it? Awesome. I will open the floor. Awesome. Well, if you do have any questions, please again reach out to us over email. We'd be happy to chat over email or meet. And as a reminder, you will get a copy of these slides and the recording of the webinar as well. And Sandy and I would love to thank you for your time and attention today. It's always a pleasure to see folks on our webinars, and this is why we do that. So thank you again, and we will see you next month.